left corner, touchdown!
Give the DJ Dozer 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Goodbye, he is gone!
Touchdown, Michigan! Hollis off the Heisman!
And listen to this joint go wild.
Here's Tom Osborne, whose teams had lost 5 straight games in the Orange Bowl, 7 bowl games overall, and the sense was, here's a nice guy who can't finish first.
The perception that even though Nebraska was always winning 9 and 10 games, it wasn't winning the big one.
Coach Osborne, I'm sure he really felt it because he came into the program in '72 after winning 2 championships in a row, and then they said he couldn't win the big one.
As a kid watching the Cornhuskers play, and even as a recruit, that was part of the thing that was overhanging this whole program, is that we hadn't won a championship under Tom Osborne.
I remember one national writer called him bowl impaired. Nebraska was a bowl impaired program.
You win 9 games, you win 10 games, you get to the championship game, but you don't win it. And that's the perception. Hey, it wasn't Tom's perception, but that's the way the fans looked at it.
There's always people who tend to talk about what you haven't done. And so the thing that was missing was a national championship. There were some who said, well, Nebraska can't win the big one, Tom Osborne can't win the big one.
That bothered us because if you look at his history, that usually every team that he played in the bowl game either shared a championship or came close or finished high in the ranking. So it wasn't like he was playing teams that weren't ranked high.
Opinions varied as to why Nebraska couldn't win the big one. But one fact that Cornhusker fans agreed on was that the program needed to address its need for speed.
Losing a lot of those Orange Bowl games, and especially to the Florida State and the Miami teams, had taught Nebraska that you really need speed, especially on defense, to compete.
When assistant coach Kevin Steele and defensive coordinator Charlie McBride convinced Coach Osborne that in order to beat the elite teams, it wasn't Miami's offense or Florida State's offense. It was their defense that was beating us in those bowl games. They played an attacking 4-3. We can do that. But coach, you've got to let us put athletes on the defensive side of the ball. So it was in the late stages of 1991 and 92 when they began to convert Nebraska away from a 52 defense to an attacking, blitzing, bump and run cover defense, and turn those linebackers into guys that can get to the quarterback.
So now we started moving guys that was normally corners to safeties, safeties to linebackers, linebackers to defensive ends, and we got extremely fast.
Once we made that adjustment to the 4-3, then we really went out and recruited the young men that can fit those positions.
And so a lot of those guys were 4-4, 4-5, 40 guys that would normally play in the secondary. So we got more speed on the field. We got our pass rushers rushing the passer all the time instead of half the time. And I think it made us a better defense.
Nebraska's 1993 season concluded on January 1st in the 1994 Orange Bowl. The Cornhuskers entered the game at 11-0 and ranked number 1 in the coaches' poll. Florida State was 11-1 and ranked number 1 in the AP poll. The winning coach, either Tom Osborne or Bobby Bowden, would claim his first national title. The Seminoles were a 17.5-point favorite.
We knew that we were the better team, and there was no way that anyone can tell me that on that night that Florida State was better than us.
We outplayed Florida State. You know, we had a punt and return call back that no one really figured out why. There was a fumble in the end zone that was counted as a touchdown.
Passes the ball and Nebraska recovers. Was he in? No, they say touchdown. He'd broken the play.
The underdog Cornhuskers battled the Seminoles tooth and nail all night long. When Byron Bennett kicked a 27-yard field goal to give Nebraska a 16-15 advantage with 1:16 remaining, Husker Nation could taste a national title.
The things that stand on my mind about that Florida State championship game was, with a minute 16 seconds left, it's over. This game is in the bag. I personally was celebrating on the sideline.
You think that when you take over the lead with a minute and 16 seconds left that you can seal a deal, but for some reason that wasn't the case that night. And it was heartbreaking.
Behind Heisman Trophy winner Charlie Ward, Florida State drove into field goal range.
He's got it.
We still gave ourselves a chance after that. Well, we drove the ball down the field and had the opportunity to kick a field goal. And I've always told people that the last thing you want to do is put the fate of a game on the leg of a kicker, because anything can happen.
45 yards to steal it from Florida State and to give Cinderella, Nebraska a tremendous win and a national championship. And he hooked it left. Florida State wins.
It was a very devastating loss against a very good Florida State team that ended up winning the '93 national championship. But when we looked back on it, we also looked at that '93 Florida State team as a team that was literally who's who of the next year's NFL draft. We came 1 second and a missed field goal away from beating them. Just an incredibly talented team in Florida State. And we should have defeated them and won the national title in '93.
I think that led to an uncommon resolve in the offseason among our players going into the 1994 season. I wouldn't say that the 1994 team was the most talented team I'd ever coached, but they probably had the best chemistry and the most commitment and resolve.
We as a coaching staff didn't really have to motivate them to get them ready for the off-season program. They were ready to go the next day.
When we left the Orange Bowl, it was that minute and 16 seconds that we understood that we had done our job, but we didn't close the deal. And for that entire offseason, we would go out on the field at Memorial Stadium and they would have that minute and 16 seconds left on the scoreboard, and they also had underneath there a slogan that said unfinished business.
We started our off-season conditioning. At the end of every single session, we'd put a minute and 16 seconds on a clock, and we worked as hard as we physically could for a minute and 16 seconds longer. You learn a lot about your teammates because at the end of those workouts, you wouldn't think you could take another step. Well, it turns out you can.
That was our goal going into that '94 season, was to go on to finish our business.